Yeah, was going to start off with about 5 minutes on what I consider the major challenges. We're just putting that up. While it's happening, there was, I think, a question on the last talk. Yes, Jose.
So, thank you very much for the talk. I am very happy to see that these use of error potentials are being spread. But I am very surprised to see that whenever you go to local field potentials, to single unit activity, the response to these erroneous decisions are later than in the EEG. Is it that you are recording in the proper place? What?
So I think their three greatest challenges are first, signal acquisition hardware, second, validation and dissemination, and most important, reliability. Non-invasive PCI signal acquisition needs to get away from gel. We need small and fully portable setup, monitoring, many hours without many artifacts, and guys, safe, small, packed, comfortable, reliable. interfaces with high performance applications. In terms of validation, we need to decide which BCIs for which purposes. We need formal methods of comparison. We need to determine whether information transfer rate is a useful or an adequate measure, degrees of freedom, and perhaps what I favor, performance on very specific applications. We need to show clinical practicality and efficacy, question of practical implementation, who are going to be the users, what environments do the BCIs need to function in, are they efficacious in these environments for these users. In terms of dissemination, they're now limited capabilities, as that's been brought up several times, means minimal commercial incentive. At present, BCIs are an orphan technology. We need viable business models, including clinical and technical support. The best scenario could be a combined one. Clinical applications providing science, engineering, and testing. General applications providing incentive, simplification, and robustness. And then there's the sort of the wild card of rehab applications, which may make BCIs not very definitely not an orphan technology. Finally, the biggest challenge, reliability. Up to this point, we've had largely laboratory demonstrations in controlled conditions with expert oversight. Nevertheless, there's still marked variability from trial to trial, minute to minute, and day to day. Simply enough for videos and statistics never approximates normal muscle-based control, never achieving the reliability essential for real use. Really, at this point, practical only for basic communication and useful to very few people. Reliability requires qualitative upgrades of as yet unknown nature. Three fundamental issues, I think, in regard to reliability: the central role of adaptive interactions between the BCI and the user's brain, the distributed nature of CNS function, which you've heard something about in the last talk, the use of additional signals, and better feedback. So these, I think, are the three greatest challenges. So, in order of importance, signal acquisition part, validation, dissemination. So, and I think that's
Hello, everybody. So I'm Bijan. Does this work? Okay, so I don't have that many slides. I just wanted to sort of give you my, I guess, personal emphasis for discussion, hopefully. So I always come back to this. I always come back to this issue, which is that we have all these different electrical signals that we can report from the brain, and we really don't know that much about them. And the brain is a huge thing, right? The human brain in particular has a lot of real estate, and there's got to be a lot of information that's available that we can extract from the brain, but I don't think we've really got a good handle on how to get it out. And I think that to be able to get it out, we have to take into account of this. And the other issue related to, of course, these applications of reliability, we all know this, and something we have to learn about. So the way I kind of bring these things together is the idea that we have these different scales, and we have some potential curves that relate the information and the reliability across the scales. And you know, you would never build a curve with these axes. You'd have to define the axes more carefully. But I think that we need to know what the shapes of these curves are, and we need to have ways of defining them. And until we have an understanding of how to quantify the problem in this way, we're not going to know what the right decisions are. And I think that a lot of ways that we're tackling the problem are kind of like lamppost approaches. There are technologies we have available to us, systems that we know how to use, and so on. And we haven't really sort of opened up the door to all the different ways we're trying to tackle the problem. So just to summarize, I would say that we need to have a set of design specification curves. We need to tell someone else how they need to design the device to achieve a certain. And we need to establish, and I think we need to fix, almost, not fix, we need to have a set of behavioral metrics which we don't all reinvent. I don't think the behavioral metrics are really the key. They depend on the application and the patient population and all kinds of important issues, but I don't think they're the ones which we should be innovating too much. What I think we need to be innovating on is what we're trying to get out of the brain. I think that neuroscience is a very young field, and we still don't know how to interact with the brain. Get these. We have to explore those spaces. So basically, what that means is pick an axis, fill the space with data, right? Figure out properties of these different signals, and this basically means quantify, 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 and inevitably, whenever we start doing this, the numbers are going to vary a lot. They're going to vary for a million and one different reasons, and we really have to tackle that. I think that the way to deal with variability is really to get abundant signal sampling. I think that we have a totally sparse sampling of what information is available in the brain. Even with the most state-of-the-art multi-electrode recording in an animal model, it's just impoverished. We need to have much more information. We need to sample tissue repeatedly, intensively, same animal, to get the types of information we need. We just don't know if the results we're getting are fair. And we have to do this in the context connection between the level and decide how we're going to figure out this problem. So we need a diversity of approaches, the level of signal acquisition and that side of the problem. I think we need to have standards for deciding behaviors, compare, cost of.
I don't have any slides, and this is going to be very short. But the topic of this session was scientific and sort of engineering challenges. And I guess one of the things that I've always liked about the BCI field is that it's made up of at least a neuroscientific aspect and an engineering aspect. And it's worth thinking about what the relationship between those two is. We often think about the engineering has to drive or the science drives the engineering, but I think the engineering kind of allows us to ask questions about science. So BCIs are not just an application, they're a new way of doing science, because they're a new way of asking questions about how the brain represents information, how the brain learns from experience. So I think definitely the engineering feeds into the science. It's very less clear at some of these meetings how the science feeds into the engineering. I mean, I often sit here and I think, does the BCI field need innovations in science? And I've sort of put that up slightly as a devil's advocate question. I mean, do you need scientists? If you have big data, if you have these data sets, you have these machine learning algorithms, whatever, has it stopped being a scientific question? Has it stopped being a scientific field? Is it just an engineering question? How can I best decode this particular piece of information from these signals? And does it matter that there's sort of underlying scientific questions? And I mean, I think it obviously does matter, because it's very important. There's still a lot we don't understand about how the brain sort of fundamentally encodes information, represents information, processes, performs computations, and produces behavior. And I think a lot of the stumbling blocks, I think, are not just that we haven't got a big enough data set or a smart enough machine learning algorithm. I think there's also some sort of fundamental things that we don't understand about how the brain actually generates behavior at a sort of systems level. And so my one sort of point, I think, is that to really understand some of these problems, the types of experiments that are going to be important is where the user is actually within the loop of the BCI system. So some of the things that we heard about in the last talk, about how the brain actually learns from experience and rewards and adapts its organization. And so I just want to put it as a sort of suggestion or a thought that maybe one of the reasons why we haven't maybe seen as much progress as we hoped in the BCI field is it's very easy to do offline analysis of data sets that someone else has collected and apply decoding algorithms to data sets that fit there. But to really understand, if the important thing is to have the user in the loop, we actually need to have a lot more closed loop online experiments where we're testing how the decoders actually behave when the subject is there using that decoder. And that's maybe something that we can't get from just by piling a lot of analysis into already collected data sets. And it does become much more, I think, of a sort of experimental scientific program. That's it.
Want to raise comments? Yes.
Jonathan? Yeah.
She's got it.
Hello. I own a small startup that exactly had the same concern and then also address the hardware issues. So Jingai, I'll have a booth and then you guys can come and maybe also have some suggestions. So we recently finished a very small portable brain telemetry wireless animal recording device that would be a little bigger than the coin size that all these in vivo electrophysiologists can actually use this on animal, mostly in plant electrodes, so that they can completely away from these cables. So we initially started 16 channels and then working on 32 channels. And then our concern is because it's a neural recording is a very high sampling rate compared to EEG. So we quickly actually saturated most of the commercial solutions for the bandwidth. So we accomplished as much, and then with 32 channel recordings, with combining all these ports, we can probably scale up to 120 channels. And then some of the customers are very excited about it, but also packing all these small, many channels in a small device, there are so many engineering constraints, so that we would like to have some feedback for many of these mostly research leaders. What would be the important concerns that people will have, so that we can somehow come up with some standards that most of the scientific community users could be satisfied. But one of the questions that we're not quite prepared is, because it's a wireless, and I don't want to have the data stolen. So can I have all this data encrypted? Or, most of the people do not want to have compressed data, but then some of the people have concerns that, well, we're scientists, we want to have some proprietary access of the data. If it's a brain telemetry, how are you going to secure my data? So those things, I think we haven't really addressed this question yet. We're just trying to kind of commercialize it as soon as we can so that we can benefit the community. But if you guys have some suggestions, or maybe into the future, whether this would be an important concern or those things, so we would like to invite you guys to our booth to maybe brainstorm with some feedback. Thank you.
So I'd like the comments of the commenters, but one aspect of more refined data and bigger data that wasn't specifically addressed was the idea of doing extremely high density recordings, and that's probably more practical inside the head than outside. But I've been told that the field is ready now to make a 10,000 channel wireless chip. And now, of course, under the Obama Brain Initiative, there's now talk about 1 million neuron recording and so on. So that's another way to get much more highly intensive data about distributed brain patterns of brain activity to substitute for long or to add to long recording times and large subject samples. Also, much higher resolution picture of distributed brain patterns, and that of course has important applications for brain science, because none of that's been done and none of that is understood, and also for reading the information for those who want to read the information from the brain.
Morning, John. I'm Katya Hill from the University of Pittsburgh. And, I think I would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to say, there's the research going on signal acquisition and the performance that's being achieved regarding signals. However, as BCIs are moving into clinical applications, and last night certainly there was a lot of discussion on use of BCI as communication systems. And at Pittsburgh, there's also work with robotics and wheelchairs. So our work in looking at communication performance involves very different parameters of measurement, as in terms of communication competence and linguistic competence and what it means to be an effective communicator. So those databases, or that data mining that we're working with Carnegie Mellon to establish, is also where this community needs to integrate with the researchers on that end of performance. And that gets directly into, we do have volumes of data on how AAC speakers are establishing communication rates, their reliability, on their number of words given, daily usage patterns, accuracy in their various systems. So that type of measurement is well established in the field, and I know Rory Cooper in his lab has a data logger for wheelchairs. So as BCIs are being used to perform daily mobility tasks, that data logging data shows the successful use of it, or how users are actually, driving chairs. So I encourage that kind of collaboration, and that really needs to be part of what the future challenge is. How do you merge those two performance data, signal versus actual task success?
Yeah. I mean, it depends. If you have enough data and you have basically comparable data in which different algorithms were used, you can perhaps compare what happened. You have a starting point, and then you compare what happened in the different analysis methods, and that's really what you're looking at. So you get some idea of how much adaptation is really going on with the the new data test sets under the different algorithms. It just depends on having huge amounts of data, and a lot of different approaches were used.
Yeah, just a very brief point to address the point that was raised earlier about in sort of the era of big data, do we need science? What role does science have, or hypotheses and things like that? And in the recent article that we wrote for the 100th anniversary of IEEE Spectrum, we addressed this to some short degree, basically in the context of machine learning. there are very advanced machine learning algorithms out there that can mine massive data sets, but the larger the data set, actually the more important it becomes to have some appropriate constraints or priors in place in your machine learning algorithm. And in our view, those priors and constraints come from the scientific community. Maybe in the very distant future, we'll have sophisticated enough machine learning algorithms that you don't need any constraints or any appropriate model specification, but we feel that's fairly unlikely. So I just wanted to make that one point just from the point of view of machine learning, that I think there's always a role for the scientific community to play in informing these models and improving their accuracy. That's it, just a brief point on that.
Right there.
Thank you very much. This is an exciting discussion. Excuse me. I believe that one of the excuse me, not awake yet. I believe that one of the underlying problems for our difficulties in reliability is that we haven't really accepted the fact that the brain is a plastic system. And so if we try to define reliability using our old methods, our current methods, we're not going to succeed. I think the secret to a useful system is not that we figure out how to rigidly make it reliable over time by getting massive data sets. I think the secret lies in our understanding of what is the mechanism of adaptability from day to day. The scientific community doesn't know the answer to this, and so we're struggling trying to use a technology that requires us to know how is our brain adapting from day to day. You know, if picking up a cup today may produce quite a different signal 2 days from now when we say, I want to pick up that cup. The letter B, I don't know how, I'm not an expert in the communication P300 spellers, but if my dog is named Bilbo and the letter B comes up today, it might mean something very different if Bilbo has a problem 3 days from now and the letter B comes up. I don't know how our plastic brain, our brain is changing every day, all day. And so if you think about it, each day our brain changes, but our ability to write the letter A doesn't change. So somehow our own nervous system has figured out how to deal with plastic changes that are occurring and still give us the same either physical or cognitive performance from day to day. I think what we do not understand is the mechanism of how our brain deals with plasticity and gives us consistent performance from day to day.
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Tanja Schulz. I'm coming from KIT in Carnegie Mellon. I'm from a very different community. I do language and speech processing, so doing automatic speech recognition. And from day one I entered this field, I remember people were complaining about a lack of data. So we started with 10 hours, moved to 100 hours, 1,000 hours. Recently we saw a paper training on 100,000 hours of spoken speech, which is substantial. Only Google has it at this point. Did it help to improve performance? Yes, it did. Did it help to understand how we process speech? No. So we still don't really know how humans do language and speech processing to a full extent. But what really helped in the community was to put out challenges, step by step, increase the demands of the challenges, and have the community to work on those, battle on those, trying to solve this and make improvements, but still prevent the community from battling too much and improving and do incremental changes, but rather put out challenges so that we make big leaps in the field. So that was what helped in the speech and language processing and might help here as well.
Needed the mic, no one can hear me. John, there's a question about people say we don't understand about the plasticity and the brain a lot, and there are questions about machine learning algorithms. But what about the environmental conditions that keep changing from every day? I mean, the health of the patient is changing, the medications are changing, the artifacts are changing. we're not doing anything about it. We collect data, but we don't collect information about all these other things that are changing around. Maybe the carer is changing, maybe there are so many other things changing at the same time. The health, the diet, the the emotional state of the person is changing. Can't we include those to help us understand or build more reliable systems? Maybe testing, like having a small battery of tests just before we collect the data to say, well, okay, his arousal state is so and so, and it's similar to when we collected the last data, or it has deteriorated, and we adapt our system based on that. Because it becomes an engineering challenge as well to say, well, what we collected yesterday should, the same algorithm should work on the data that we collect the next day. It's a challenge because so many other things have changed. And I don't know if, sometimes I get so many questions from Teresa about, we have this artifact, we have that artifact, and we don't consider them. I mean, in general, people talk about artifact separation and artifact removal on the side, but they don't bring all these things together. Isn't that important?